Hello and welcome back. Now that we have moved on from the course introduction section of the Certified Solutions Architect course, I now want to move on and talk about some of the account and physical organization of Amazon Web Services and how that is displayed and is going to be used here in the Orion papers. So, let's talk briefly about the two main sections of the Orion papers, which are account and services layer and physical and networking layer, which I'll go into in the next lesson. So for this video, we're going to concentrate on the account and services layer, and this here is the top level of this layer. And I want to talk a little bit about what this layer means and what it represents. So the account and services layer represents how you create, access, and manage an AWS account and its services, from how you interact with an AWS account and manage user rights to how you access and use various AWS services and features. So this layer here, starting here with account and services layer, is all about account management and managing services. So when we take a look at the diagram here, I just want to explain exactly what's going on here, because this is going to be a foundation for much of the rest of the course and how we use the Orion papers. So here we have AWS infrastructure containers. So this represents here is the entirety of AWS. So anything inside of this is AWS architecture, infrastructure, and services. Then everything outside of this represents you, the user, or the open internet, or how you interface with Amazon Web Services. So here up top, we have a set of users. We have our root user, which if you click on this here, we can define the root user. And the root user is the user created when you first create your AWS account. And that again is called the root user. So this is most likely you if you have now created an account for yourself. Its credentials are the email and password used when signing up for your AWS account. And again, by default, the root user has full administrative rights and privileges to every part of your AWS account. And we're going to go into much more detail about this when we move into the IAM section of this course. Next, we have AWS users, and this represents users that may be a part of your company or people that you grant access to access your AWS account. And in this scenario, what's happening here is we have AWS production users. If you click on that, this is a brief description, basically explaining what this represents. And then also AWS users, a different section, which I'm calling developer users, right? They have access to our developer account. So down here is our AWS infrastructure. And in this example for this diagram, there are two separate AWS accounts, both opened and run by the root user. And then you have users who have access to the production account down here. And then you have users who have access to the development account. So this would be an example if an organization had two separate AWS accounts, one for production and then one for development. And then the various users represented by these two groups here that would have access solely to just one or the other. And what these lines represent here is these are the two ways, the two main ways. There are several other ways that we won't go into in this course, but these are the main two ways that we interface with AWS through either the console, which you see here, or through the AWS CLI. And again, we're going to go into a little more detail about these a little further in the course. But what this represents here is how data would flow from the user using their own computers across the open internet and then into AWS infrastructure. And then how do they gain access to an account? And then by clicking on this right here, to the services within that account. So you look at storage, compute, development, and you see things like S3, EC2. And if you notice over here, you see EC2, you see S3. So on the account and services layer here, this is meant to mimic what is here in terms of the way that I have laid out the diagram and the information so that you know that here when we talk about account and services in the account and services layer, this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about how to access and manage these services through this mean of interface with AWS. Now, taking a look specifically at the account connection tools, the ways that we can interface with AWS, let's just take a brief look at the console and the CLI. So the AWS Management Console, generally referred to as the console, is the primary mean for which we will access and interact with AWS in this course. So 98% of this course, we're going to be interacting with AWS and managing its services through the console right over here. All actions done in the console are considered API calls, so that's important to understand. And here we see a picture of the AWS console. It's just there for your reference if you so need it. Moving over to the CLI is the AWS command line interface, and it's generally just referred to as the CLI, as you'll hear me do for the rest of this course. It is a text-based interface for accessing and administering AWS resources. So you see here the command line, in which this is a screenshot of me logged into an EC2 instance. All commands executing using the CLI are also API calls, and though also require an API key configuration, and we will go into more detail about that in future lessons. So these are the two main ways that we interface with AWS and manage its services. So that is what's represented here by the AWS account and services layer. It's how is AWS organized, how do we access it, and how do we manage services from an account standpoint. So moving on from here, if you want to then dive in and learn about any one of these services groups, for example, here you can click on storage, and it will take us to lessons on S3 and Glacier and all the various ways that information can be moved in and out of S3. Then obviously moving back, we can go back up to the top level, and in the next lesson, we're going to move into the physical and networking layer and learn about how that is organized and used. But for now, we will conclude this lesson. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.